Hey guys, this is Two Roses. I'm going to give you some behind the scenes look at my latest release, Endless Nights. I'm going to show you mainly my thinking process behind the guitars for arranging and mixing decisions. So I hope you find this helpful or entertaining at least. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I have my two guitar tracks here. One of them's panned far to the left and the one's to the right. And I did that for separation purposes. Typically, when you have two guitars playing, you don't want them layering over top of each other dead center. It's always a good idea to give them a bit of space, their own spot in the stereo field. So this is what they sound like, completely dry with no effects or sends. Sounds like poo. So first off, both guitars are samples. Nothing was recorded with a live player, unfortunately. But they have two different tones. One of them has more of a mid-range tone, and the other one has more upper harmonics. The right one, I believe, has more of a mid-range tone to it, while the left one has a bit more high range. So I like the left one better. I wanted the right one to have a bit more of the same tone as the left one. The first thing I did was listen to what I don't like about the guitar. So if we listen to just the right one again, that mid-range tone I didn't like. So the first thing I did was I added EQ. This one is a precision EQ, meaning you can attack precisely where you want to boost or cut certain frequencies by just changing the slope, and this is where the dip is happening. So this one is dipping at around 381 hertz, cutting out a little bit of its fundamental frequency. You'll see it when I play it. So those peaks there are pretty much where its fundamental frequency lies. So I wanted to get rid of that, but that didn't exactly achieve what I wanted. So I did the bulk of the processing happens here in the virtual mix rack. You can ignore the two trimmers here. These guys are there just to control input and output levels. But the bulk of just shaping the tone of this guitar happens with the EQ, the compressor, and the revival, which is a exciter or harmonic enhancer. So if I turn this off and on, you'll notice a huge difference. So you probably noticed that it got quieter. Mainly that has to do with the EQ and the compressor. The EQ is cutting out a lot of the guitar's mid-range. We have a dip just a little under a decibel at around 1K or 1.2K, and another one around 2K, again at 3 decibels. But this one here up top is a high shelf, and I'm giving that a boost, which actually is boosting 10,000 hertz and above. Roughly, at least that's my assumption. So what this does is it gives it more air, brings out a bit more of that upper frequencies that I wanted to get. And then I added a compressor on top of that to just control dynamics. It's doing a 2-to-1 ratio, nothing crazy. And then a harmonic enhancer doing the shimmer effect, which is giving more harmonic enhancement to the upper frequencies. So technically this EQ and this harmonic enhancer are kind of doing the same thing, but they do different effects, because while this shelf is just boosting those frequencies, this one is enhancing a random sort of frequencies. It could be odd ones, even ones, a mixture of both. So you don't really know what you get out of it until you add the effect. I did that to both guitars. So both guitars have the exact same processing. Here's the left one. It's the exact same. So together with both of them, they sound like this. And off. So the pluck sound on the right guitar is a lot more prominent. So with this processing, I pretty much eliminated that, and you're only left with mainly the upper harmonics of these guitars. To top it off, I just added a delay going through a reverb to give both guitars a bit more depth. So with the send effect, it sounds like this. Moving on, in the second half of this song, the synths come in, and they sound like this. So what I did here was a couple things. So in this arrangement, the guitars and the synths, they kind of do what's called a call and response. And what that is when one instrument plays a section, the other instrument responds with their part. And so you hear that a lot with the pads here in combination with the guitars. As the pad plays, the guitars go after, and vice versa. This is a good way to just allow things to breathe without having to really do any mixing or EQing or anything like that, because it mixes itself. Each part has its turn saying what it wants to say. The second part is the pluck sounds, and these guys sound fine up until one point where the synth plucks and the guitars kind of clashing together, and it happens right here. So to fix that, you either do one of two things. You either EQ one to make space for the other, or you do volume automation so that one can dominate over the other. Because essentially what's happening is it's frequency masking. Both instruments share the same frequency space. They're fighting for that area. So the first thing I do is I add an EQ. We have two here, and these are dynamic EQs, meaning they only react when a signal passes a certain threshold, much like a compressor. This one here, the purple one, is acting internally, meaning it only, when the guitar signal itself exceeds that threshold, then it starts to react. The blue one is external, or it's sidechained, meaning another instrument is triggering this blue one to activate, and this blue one is being activated by the synth plucks. You'll notice that when I play the synths, the blue one will react only. So that technique alone allows it to automatically create space when they are clashing together. But I still felt like the guitars were too loud or too in your face, and I wanted the synths to take up center stage. So to do that, I then did also volume automation. And you'll see in this entire area, this channel here controls the volume level of both guitars. And in the first half, you'll notice that it's at one consistent level, goes down in volume. It has a little accent here, goes back to its normal volume, and then takes another dip, which is actually where that frequency masking is occurring. So if I turn that off, just so you get an idea. And then with it. You see, the guitar has got lower in volume. It made a lot more space for the synths to actually be present, but it didn't take away the guitars entirely. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that even though you are ducking something for a period of time, your brain is already used to the guitars. In the first half, I already gave you the guitars, you know what they're playing, you know what their tone is. In the second half, they're not that important anymore because I added the synths as the new idea, and so I want them to take center stage. So ducking them in volume doesn't completely eliminate them from, your mind. You still know that they're there, you can still audibly hear them. So it only makes sense that when they're not important, to duck them a little bit to make space for others. And it probably works more in your favor than just simply sidechaining, even though I did a bit of both. Here we have a accent happening, and this has nothing to do with masking or anything. It just has to do with just filling up space, because I wanted to just add a bit more excitement to the guitars, make them breathe a bit, have a bit of life to them. It was only because in this particular section there is kind of dead space. Nothing is really happening except the guitars playing their notes. So if I play without it. So it just makes those guitars stand out just a little bit more, just so that you don't completely forget about them. And it kind of adds a bit of motion to the entire track. So all together, with all that processing, So I hope you learned something during this whole thing. If you have any questions, by all means leave them in the comments. If you haven't listened to my latest release, Endless Nights, it's out on all streaming platforms. Go check it out if you haven't already, and I'll see you when I see you. Take care.